Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. From 52 lead changes to 3 red flags to a celebration with the people, the 107th Indianapolis 500 was easily one of the most memorable here in recent history, and today we're going to relive it. We're going to break down Josef Newgarden's incredible win. We're also going to give our outlook for the remainder of the IndyCar season and predict who will win this weekend in Detroit. Going to talk a lot of IndyCar today and wrap up what was a wild race at the Indianapolis 500. Great Memorial Day weekend, fantastic weather. B. Scott, how was your Memorial Day?
So I was in the Division One baseball selection committee room, on Memorial Day, getting ready to announce the field of 64. But I did get to see a little bit of the race Sunday night, and oh boy, I listened to it. I will say I listened to it on the radio while I was working. So big shout out to Nick Yeoman locking down turn 1 on IMS Radio Network. Great job there. But yes, it was an exciting race, and I'll tell you what, it gets you even more pumped when you're listening to it on the radio. I may actually become one of those old guys that sits in the stands with the big old fashioned radio headphones on, listening to it on the radio, because oh man, does that get you hyped up.
It really does.
I mean between like Nick Yeoman and Jake Query, they rock it. I mean, they get your blood pumping, even if you're sitting at a desk in your house. It doesn't matter.
It is one of the, kind of the, I don't know if you call it benefits or a bright spot for the fact that the race is blacked out. In central Indiana, it does kind of make it a little bit better that they do such a great job with the radio broadcast, because, yeah, they do kill it every year.
Yeah, and apparently the TV broadcast was horrible. I mean, you basically tuned in for commercials with a 30-second break of the Indy 500 every now and again. Yet again, NBC has dropped the ball now, like 3 years in a row now, and there's just like constant commercials instead of actual racing.
Yeah, I mean, it's
good.
It's the same way, it's a discussion for another day, but like it's the same way. I mean, I watched the Daytona 500 this year, and that was the main complaint. From the Daytona 500 was all the commercials. So I mean, I understand, like, you got to pay the bills, you got to sell those ads, but at the same time, it's like, at what cost? I don't see the side by side as much that you used to see, all the time, during broadcast. So it's tough that it's going that direction, but hopefully we can find a happy medium where, like, hey, you guys can make your money, but we also want to see the race, because what a race it was on Sunday. Going into our race summary here, the 107th Indianapolis 500, Alex Palou brings the field to the green flag, leads lap 1. He and Rinus VeeKay trade the lead in the early going, and the race does stay green until lap 92. That is when Stingray Robb crashes coming out of turn 1 to bring out the race's first yellow. Rinus VeeKay, during that caution, pit stops happen. Rinus VeeKay collides with Alex Palou on pit road and is forced to serve a drive-through penalty. It highlighted what was an insane day on pit road. I mean, there was a lot of pit road miscues between the one with Rinus VeeKay and Alex Palou. Catherine Legge almost spins out on pit road. Colton Herta and Romain Grosjean make contact. There was a lot of craziness on the pit road. The race then goes back green and stays green again until lap 150. That's when the second yellow of the race comes out, as for the second straight year, Romain Grosjean crashes out of the Indy 500. A rough first couple of years for him at the track. And then, where all the magic happened, 20 laps to go, that's when a lot started to transpire, as does pretty much every year when it gets to that point in the race. Ryan Hunter-Reay was leading. Marcus Ericsson and Battle Award were battling for position a few spots back, because once those stops kind of cycled through, that was what was going to be the lead. With 16 laps to go, Felix Rosenqvist loses control of his car. He gets into the wall, collects Kyle Kirkwood, whose tire goes flying outside of the track. Luckily, no one was hurt. Kirkwood goes upside down. That brings out the first red flag, which, thank your lucky stars that tire, just basically, got somebody a new car, essentially courtesy of the speedway, I'm sure. But nothing else severe happened there. That was a very scary incident, but glad that nobody got hurt there. With 9 laps to go, the race is about to restart with Pato O'Ward out front, but the start is waved off as O'Ward tries to keep the field bunched up behind him, which led me to turn to one of the people I was at the race with, and I was like, theoretically, could he just do that 8 more times? And be like, oh, guys, I screwed it up again, man. 5th time in a row. Oh, man. He just keeps doing that lap after lap. With 8 laps to go, the race does restart. Newgarden and Ericsson go nearly 3 wide for the lead. Newgarden does grab the lead. O'Ward back to third. Pato O'Ward tries to make a wild move and goes hard inside of Ericsson in turn 3, causing him to crash and bring out another yellow. Augustine Canapino and Simon Pagino also are involved in that incident. The race then restarts with 5 laps to go. Coming to that green flag, Benjamin Peterson and Ed Carpenter crash to bring out the 3rd red flag of the race, and that sets up a 1-lap shootout to decide the Indy 500. Like last year, Marcus Ericsson unleashes the dragon, swerving to stop Newgarden from making a run. Newgarden, though, eventually does get a great run coming on the backstretch, passes Ericsson to take the lead. Josef Newgarden nearly runs onto pit road trying to keep Ericsson behind him, and he ends up winning the 107th running of the greatest spectacle in racing. He led just 5 laps of the race, but that's all he needed. He goes through the fence and celebrates with the fans. One of the coolest things I've seen at the track that was truly incredible. Marcus Ericsson and Santino Ferrucci make up the podium. Alex Palou and Alexander Rossi round out the top 5. All told, 52 lead changes, 5 cautions, 3 red flags. Just an absolutely incredible race. And I mean, when I think about Josef Newgarden's win, I mean, I put on the outline here one word to describe Newgarden's win, and I have a hard time picking just one word. There's a lot of different words you can use. I'm going to go with breathtaking. That's the one word I would use to describe it. I was literally out of breath having watched the end of that race. I was like, oh, man, that just took the wind right out of me. Now, maybe that was in part due to the fact that I was walking from turn 3 to turn 2, where our shuttles were going to take us to Lucas Oil. That could have been part of the reason why I was out of breath. But man,
Craig, your daily river walks should have helped with that.
They did. It was funny because I was like, man, I kind of like wrote this weekend off as far as like, I've been trying to do a little bit of a fitness challenge, and I kind of knew it's like this weekend's gonna get out of hand. I'm just not gonna worry.
It's a
about
holiday
it.
weekend. It's race weekend.
Exactly.
It doesn't count.
Right. I was like, I'm not worried about it.
Calories taken in at IMS don't exist.
Exactly. And I was like, honestly, I am going to get a little bit of exercise because I was like, we're going to walk to Lucas Oil. We're going to walk from our shuttle to turn 3. I was like, going to get plenty of exercise in on Sunday. But, man, what a fantastic finish to that race. I mean, say what you want about going right from the pits to a white and green flag. We're going to get more on that here in a minute. But that was truly amazing. Newgarden started 17th. Made it up to the front late and hung around. He made an incredible pass to go from 3rd to 1st before the O'Ward crash. You go back and watch the highlights and you see how strong he was and how he made the right moves late. But I could tell you, at least from my perspective live, I mean, I never thought he truly had it won until that very end moment where he was able to make that pass. What a performance. We'll get into all the emotions here in a little bit later. But one of the best finishes I've seen, hands down, live at the track. I mean, maybe as far as the last 20-some years that I've gone, maybe the Hornish pass on Marco Andretti beats it, or maybe the J.R. Hildebrand crash and Dan Weldon winning it beats it. But man,
I mean, how about the nose, like just the finish between Ryan Hunter-Reay and Elio Castroneves?
That's another good one.
That was a spectacular finish.
Yeah, maybe
it really was.
We need to do that sometime. Rank the Indy 500 finishes, over from the last however many years.
I mean, okay, and I guess one that neither one of us saw, even me, how old I am, but the spin and win.
Yeah, spin and win. The close finish between Scott Goodyear and Al Unser Jr. There's a lot of good ones, but man, as far as the ones that I've seen live, that one's way up there for me.
Yeah, though I would describe this one. It's okay. It's kind of hard to put it into a word, but relief. Let me explain. This win was a huge sigh of relief for Josef Newgarden. This has been the one race that's eluded him. And interesting little rabbit hole fact. Josef Newgarden won it on his 12th attempt at the Indy 500. The same number of attempts it took Will Power to win the Indy 500. So
And
I don't know.
TK.
And TK. I just knew about the Will Power one because the team connection there. But it was a huge relief for him. You could just see it with the way he celebrated. This one it has meant so much to him. I mean, look, he's won here before. Indy Lights. I mean, he was a heck of a driver there. Then he came up through Sarah Fisher and then kind of got absorbed into Carpenter Racing when they kind of merged. And it's just, it's been a place that has meant a lot to him. And he's always been right around there. When he was with Ed Carpenter, that he had some good cars then. Now he's with Penske, and the pressure is greater on you when you're with a team like Penske, especially when your boss owns the track. But this is the one that just kept eluding him. He's a two-time champion, and it's just being able to now really cement his name in the history books of IndyCar. Because we've talked about this numerous times. What are you more remembered for? Winning an IndyCar title or winning the Indy 500? It's winning the Indy 500. I mean, not just because your face is immortalized forever on the Borg Warner, but I mean, people come out just to race this race. This is it. Um, and some drivers have we at the same time, Scott Dixon, we're going to remember him for both as well. We remember him for being an Indy 500 winner. We're also going to remember him for just a heck of a career in general. But this is one of this was the last piece really remaining on Josef Newgarden's resume to put him up there in that conversation with the most memorable drivers in IndyCar history. He's a multiple time champion now and an Indy 500 winner.
It's wild too because like I still think of Josef Newgarden as like one of the younger drivers in this. I mean, he's only 32,
Yes,
but like that's
but
what
still,
when you think of like, oh man, because I never really like, obviously I knew that like they historically he's struggled at the 500. He's got some top 5 finishes here and there, but for the most part, especially with Penske, for whatever reason he hasn't really been in contention. But I never really thought of him like I did with, like, for instance, Tony Kanaan, and maybe I don't know, maybe because it's the
or Will
favorite,
Power when he
yeah,
won.
right, where it was like, man, this was the one that had been eluding him, because like with those two wins with Power and Kanaan, you were like, okay, that's the Steve Young on the sideline saying, "Get the monkey off my back," because that's finally what they were able to do. But I didn't think of Josef Newgarden that way, just because I'm like, man, he's still like, he looks so young. I still think of him as like one of the younger drivers in the sport. But man, you're absolutely right. We
Well,
would forget about
it,
those Sarah Fisher and Ed
it's
Carpenter days.
funny. Yeah, it's funny because especially the Sarah Fisher days.
Right.
Those were a long time ago. But it's funny, like in Victory Lane, his mom came up to him and she was carrying a baby, and I was like, oh, it must be like a niece or a nephew or something. No, that's his.
Yeah.
His is him as his wife. And he said, I could. And it's funny is like he was talking like a parent. Like he's looking at his son going, "You're not going to remember this moment ever." I'm thinking that is something a parent would say. Sure, that's it. That's his kid. And it's like, dude, are you old enough to have a kid? It's like you're only 3 years younger than me. So yeah, you are. But yeah, you're right. You just don't think of Josef Newgarden as one of the big veterans. You still look at him as a young gun. I mean, we've even had this conversation of the changing of the guard to the young guns, and we're looking at Josef Newgarden as leading the way. It's like, maybe not. Maybe it really should be Alex Palou. I mean, age wise. So
Right.
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it is wild, to think to think of him that way. But yeah, such a great win for him. And one of the big points of contention, of course, after the race, was should the race have ended under caution with that wreck with 5 laps to go? Should it have just finished out under yellow? In my opinion, I don't think it should have. I think they made the right call. As someone who is not a fan of overtime like you see in NASCAR, I am a fan of IndyCar doing everything they can to ensure a green flag finish for the fans. Marcus Ericsson questioned the safety of not having a warm-up lap before going back to green, and I'm sure that'll be looked into. But also, I kind of look to the other drivers in their post-race interviews to kind of get some guidance and see, like, okay, is what's the consensus? Is it coming up in every interview? Is Santino Ferrucci talking about it? Is Pilot talking about it? What are they saying? Because they could have just as easily gone to the front, just like Newgarden. I mean, Newgarden a couple of restarts before had gone from third to first. So I mean, is Santino Ferrucci mad about it? And I didn't really get that notion from any of the other drivers. Alexander Rossi was straight up asked about it, and he was actually more concerned with some of the jumps other people were getting on restarts, including the one that Ericsson had gotten earlier on in the race. So no, and he was really non-committal as far as like talking about it. So I didn't really get the vibe from the other drivers that they felt the same way, or at least were as fired up. Now, granted, obviously Ericsson's in the emotion of not winning the race. He was right there. We saw Pato O'Ward exhibit that very same emotion, not necessarily saying that it was unfair, but just saying that, he was right there and didn't win. So you wonder how much of the concern from Ericsson is legitimate, or if that's just the emotion of, if that's drummed up even more because of the fact that you finished second. Of course, I also enjoyed the people on social media that were saying it was rigged because Penske owns the track, even though he has nothing to do with how the race finishes.
Yeah, he's not an official.
Right, yeah. They're like, oh, of course he did it to benefit his own drivers. Like, you guys do know that's not how that works, right?
Because Penske also owns IndyCar.
True, yeah, that's... Yeah.
Uh-oh. Time to get out the tinfoil.
All right. Exactly. All right. Well, welcome to the Crash Course Conspiracy Hour, where we're going to dive into the deepest conspiracies of the sport of IndyCar. But no, at the end of the day, I saw a lot of people who were in awe of how great that finish was, which, I agree with. Again, like I said, maybe one of the best finishes I've seen in my time going to the race. And in the end, I do trust IndyCar. I mean, had the race ended under caution, it would have been the third time in the last 5 years that the race had ended under yellow. So it's not as if this is a sport that's super hungry to make sure that the race ends under green no matter what. It's just, hey, they did something a little different this year, and it made for a fantastic finish, and they're always going to try to serve their fans well, and I think that absolutely happened with the green flag on the last lap.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it should have ended under caution. Look, the years that it has ended under caution, as a fan, it's like the end of the race is so good, and then it really ramps up at the end. So much more passing, and it's just crazy. And then there's a wreck with like 6 laps to go, and then it's just done. And you're like, really, that's it? Like, okay, like it's so anticlimactic, and I don't know. Even like last year, it felt that way. It was like, oh, okay. And honestly, listening to it on the radio, I thought it was over after that wreck on the front straight, and I said, well, congratulations, because even the guys on the radio like, there's no way we're going back green. There's no way they're going to red flag this. There's just not enough laps. So I was like, all right, well, congratulations, Marcus Ericsson, back-to-back winner. And they were even talking about, because there's a separate pot that's been growing since Elio won back-to-back in 01 and 02. There's a pot that's been growing that will be given to a back-to-back winner. So the pot continues to grow now. But I turned it off, and I was thinking, man, for as good as that race was, that ending yet again, anticlimactic. And it's just like kind of a bummer. And then all of a sudden I was texting I was texting my buddy Pat. I was like, okay, which person was I texting about the race? Because it was multiple people. And it was my buddy Pat. And he said, good for Josef. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, Josef Newgarden won. I'm like, no way. I turned it off. I thought Marcus Ericsson won. So I checked back in, and sure enough, by the time I turned it on, Josef Newgarden, they were still talking about it. I was like, wow, okay. So I have to tune into this tonight to see what happened. But if anything, this, I think, yes, it wasn't a conspiracy. It wasn't meant to get Josef Newgarden to win by any stretch of the imagination. If Josef Newgarden was winning the race, I guarantee you they still would have red flagged it, and Marcus Ericsson would have won. It's just that's just the way it goes. But Roger Penske doesn't have a say in what goes on the track during the race because he's not an official. Like I told you, I was like, I wonder if they red flagged it because when they did bring the cars through the first time after the wreck, it was really hairy, like getting those cars through safely. So I wonder if they red flagged it for safety reasons. But then I was like, well, they just could have taken them down pit road and problem solved. Like, and then on the broadcast, they said Marcus Ericsson should just jump it or get called for a false start and they have to go around again, which boom, done, you know? But it's, I think it was James Hinchcliffe that said, no, they're going to let this thing go green no matter what. Big jump or big pull off, whatever. But this, everybody's talking about this ending. Fans are excited about this ending. Roger Penske's no dummy. He's listening to that. He hears all of this. I wouldn't be surprised to see a green-white checker potentially work its way into IndyCar after this weekend, and just the buzz it has created for the sport. I know you don't like it, but it adds a different dimension, and it caters to the fans. Let's just be honest. It doesn't cater to the drivers. It caters to the fans. And in the end, it's the entertainment business. Look, it's not called Penske Racing Corporation, the overarching umbrella. It's Penske Entertainment. They're in the business of entertaining. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that. I mean, he's seen how it's worked in NASCAR for so long now. And he just saw how much it excited the fans to have that 1 lap shootout. I mean, if you have like a 3-lap shootout, 2-3 lap shootout at the end, that's going to be thrilling. But to guarantee that the race is going to end with a green flag, now you could do same rules where, hey, once the white flag flies, if there is a wreck, race is over. It doesn't matter because you're going to come back around and you're going to take the checkered flag regardless. But I love the idea of a green-white checker if they brought that to IndyCar, just so it could make sure races would finish under green and make it more exciting for the fans. Because you're right. Because I mean, like I said earlier, it's just when you're watching the Indy 500, when you're there in person, the adrenaline is pumping, the race is great, so much battling going on, and then it just ends under caution because one car spins and gets into the grass, and you're just like, man, it feels like a huge letdown. You're not leaving there amped up from such a great race. You're talking about just how of a bummer the ending was. And I mean, like I said, Roger Penske's smart. He's listening to this stuff. He's hearing the fans talk and the excitement that it drew.
Now, I mean, because I actually was in favor of the green-white checkered. I thought it was a good idea when it was like first implemented in NASCAR. I'm okay with it, but it's what it like the slippery slope that it inevitably leads to. Because now you have literally 3 overtimes in NASCAR that you could potentially go to, which is potentially another, you know, it can devolve into an extra 15 laps, an extra 20 laps. I mean, hey, an extra 20 laps, I mean, that's an extra, that we're talking about the Indianapolis 550, not the Indianapolis 500. And that's what I don't want it to see it devolve into as far as like, hey, it's the guy who's the first to cross the line after 500 miles. That's what the race is. And that's what
And so is the Daytona. Daytona should be that way too. The Daytona
right,
500.
right. And I understand, like, I understand, like, okay, make it the most exciting. And ultimately, I mean, I would not be surprised if that was something that happened. I just don't want to see it turn into, all right, well, somebody crashed this time, so we got to do it again. Okay, another crash happened. We will give you two chances. Because, I mean, yeah, sometimes it's a disappointing ending, but that's sports. I mean, as good as some like playoff runs in other sports. I mean, how many times? I mean, heck, there's times where we get to the Super Bowl and we're all amped up, and it ends up finishing 43-8. There's times where we get to Game 7 of the World Series and the team gets blown out, and it finishes that way. And there's times that it there's times that it just kind of ends unsatisfactory. And I understand taking precautions to make sure that it happens less, but you're not going to completely take out anticlimactic endings from notable sporting events. It's just not going to happen. I mean, but it's I get why you would want to implement it, and like I said, wouldn't be surprised to see it. I just don't want it to turn into, all right, well, we're now, because I mean, one of the great things, and one of the, at least another interesting thing about the 500 is that some years it comes down to fuel strategy. And if you're now thinking, okay, people are going to push late in the race, I now have to account for an extra 10, 15 laps. That's going to, somebody who normally would have won it, is going to be like, well, I would have won it if we hadn't have had 15 extra laps, but because we ran 15 extra laps, I lost. Now, granted, I get under everybody would be like, it's the same rules for everyone, but that's just not what I want to see happen with it.
But you may see pit stops happen later, so that means much better racing. And in case it doesn't go green, white, checker, these guys are able to actually push it even harder at the very, very end. And look, if you look at IndyCar recently, you're not seeing this across the board on their schedule. It's not typical for for IndyCar races to end under caution. However, recently for the Indy 500, it feels like it's been ending under caution year after year for so many years. I mean, I guess not all of them have, because like the 100th running, it felt like it ended under caution with everybody so far behind and Alexander Rossi just coasting it to a victory.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know. Maybe you put a limitation on how many times it can happen, but that's why I also said, hey, once the white flag flies, no matter what happens then, race is done. Maybe you say we'll have 3 chances to finish it with a green white checker, and then that's it.
And that's the other side too. You could restart it just 3 times and still have the same result as if you would have ended it at lap 200.
But at least as a fan, you walk away going, yeah, there was a concerted effort to get it to be done under green. Right now it's just like when there's like, I don't know, last year Marcus Ericsson won, and wasn't it Scott Dixon that caused the caution to come out?
No. Was it? No.
I think it
maybe.
Or it was. I know there was a year where it was like somebody won, and their teammate wrecked out in the back of the field, and it was like, oh, that brings Dixon out the caution, and all of a sudden the race was done. It's like,
I'll say
about
this:
conspiracy theories.
I'm here for potentially making making a rule. If you're gonna do anything here, if you're gonna do something that maybe avoids a green white checkered, maybe in the future, be like, if there is a red flag with less than 3 laps to go, then the race will be given one kind of like an untimed down. You'll get 1 warm up lap when the race restarts.
But that's the thing, though. Like,
and yes, I get it's kind of.
How are you going to prevent then?
It's kind of
from passing.
What do you mean?
How, like, if that one untimed warm up lap?
No. I mean,
speed.
No. I didn't. That's not what I meant. I mean, like, you come out for like one, because that's why Ericsson was mad, because they didn't get one lap to warm up the tires.
They didn't get 1 full lap to warm up the tires.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
So
okay.
If you make it to be like, well, okay, here's what we do. If there's a red flag that comes out with less than 5 laps to go, any caution laps or any warm up laps will be kind of now I get it. That's kind of the same as in a way,
Well,
and it's kind of this, it's kind of the same thing as a green white checkered, but at the same time, it's a
you're
rule.
not racing.
It's a rule that's so like, because this isn't going to happen every year. It's one of those things where
No.
it's kind of like, when the whole overtime thing happened last year with the Bills and the Chiefs. Like, it's something that's like doesn't happen every time. So you kind of wonder if changing the rules, you're kind of like chasing, different outcomes of like, okay, you can't account for everything. Sometimes it's just going to be not, an ideal situation. So you wonder if, like, if you make a rule that's just kind of so crazy that, like, okay, when in the 1% chance, 5% chance that this happens, we have something put in place, but we're not fully changing the outcome of future races and future champions potentially because of this one instance where they changed things up and did something a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see.
Or a
But
green
I
white
do.
one green white checkered on just ovals, because this doesn't
Yeah.
this
Oh,
kind of thing.
it's not an issue on
Yeah,
road
right,
courses.
exactly.
It's not. But and even most ovals, it's not an issue. We don't see this as an issue at Texas. We don't see this as an issue at Iowa. It just seems like it's been an issue at Indy recently, and you I don't know, but I would love to see something just based off because it's all about entertainment still, and based off of the buzz it has created. I would love to see something come of it because I think Roger Penske hears it and knows how exciting it was. And he's no dummy. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Or if they just say, you know what, the drivers are right. We'll just stick with ending it under caution if need be.
Yeah, and I don't think they're afraid to keep doing that either. So looking kind of back at the race here, I want to look at my standout performer here, give kind of some awards, some recognition to some drivers. My standout performance for the race, it goes to Santino Ferrucci. And I get it. He started fourth, he finishes third, so you think, okay, he made up literally one spot. Why does he get your standout performance? But for one, he did finish the highest of the drivers who started on the first two rows, so he did the best out of those guys. He was fast all month, held the pole for a bit during the Fast 12 a couple of Sundays ago. He did lead 11 laps. He had a wonderful chance to try and win the whole thing, but just came up a little bit short. And the reason why he gets my standout performance is just more or less, what his run meant to his team. AJ Foyt Enterprises hasn't had a driver finish in the top 5, let alone the podium of the greatest spectacle in racing since 2000. That was the first year I ever went to the 500, was the last time. And that was Eliseo Salazar finishing 3rd. Jeff Ward finished 4th that year. Since then, it's been a couple of top 10s and a lot of middle-of-the-pack finishes. So to have the day that he did with the equipment and team that he did, that's pretty awesome. I think, we mentioned him as a dark horse. He ended up being a pretty good pick as a dark horse because he's right there at the finish. Santino Ferrucci, what a, golf claps, what a fantastic month you had.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of drivers that had some really good runs. I mean, whether it be Colton Herta finishing in the top 10 after starting all the way back at 21st, or Callum Ilott finishing 12th, starting 27th. Delvin DiFrancesco finishing 13th after starting 25th. But for me, the guy that I mean, obviously Santino Ferrucci stands out the most, but the guy that had a quiet, good day that actually was up there leading the race for a little bit, just because of pit strategy. I'm going to go with Ryan Hunter-Reay. Ryan Hunter-Reay came in, only race this season, really no sponsors, not great equipment, started 18th and ended up finishing 11th. I mean, that's an unbelievable run. Just kept the car clean, just was quietly there all day long. So I don't know. It was impressive. And at one point, his strategy was starting to pay off a little bit, and had they not done red flags instead of just cautions, Ryan Hunter-Reay probably could have won this thing. which would have been really interesting. So kudos to him. He's my standout performer just because man, he kept that car clean. He stayed out of trouble and ran one heck of a race.
One last thing on the greatest spectacle in racing from 2023 is I wanted to do kind of the same thing we did with the GMR Grand Prix, and I wanted, again, full – I'll admit it, full ripoff of John Boy Media. I like their awards segment they do, after weekend series and stuff like that.
Does it have anything to do with you repping John Boy Media at the race?
I did. Look. Hey, John Boy Media. If you're looking to go into the motorsports game, talking IndyCar, I think would be a good way to go, or talking racing, one of those two things. But I think it's fun to kind of give an award out. We just kind of totally made up. And I'm gonna give my award. It's called the Man of the People Award, and I know when I first put this award segment out there, I wanted to avoid giving it to the winner, just because we normally we talk about the winner already, so I didn't want it to just be a forever long conversation about just one driver. But I think you guys know where I'm going with this. Josef Newgarden, who raced karts an hour away from IMS in Newcastle as a teenager, who enjoyed the Indy 500 as a fan in the stands, finally wins the greatest spectacle in racing. And we've talked about his struggles at the Speedway, despite showing flashes, whether it's in testing, practice, or qualifying. He just couldn't put it together on race day. He had never been on the podium at the 500 as a member of Team Penske. He wins the race, and what does he do? He goes into the crowd and celebrates with the fans. Got to be one of the coolest things I've seen. It's kind of funny that he did that, because when he did that, I was stunned, because my family, our family brickyard seats were on the front stretch in front of one of those gates where you can go from like the track to the stands. And I was like, wouldn't it be really cool if someone did that? Like if someone won the race and then went like through one of those gates. And so when he did that,
I was surprised
like,
it wasn't Elio first.
Right. And so when he did that, I was like, son of a you-know-what, he did it. That guy did it. That's awesome. Everybody wants to win at Indy. And of course, all the drivers talk about, how much it means and how much they love, Indy and that kind of thing. And not saying anything nefarious here, but sometimes you wonder how much, because obviously, you see other drivers win, and they go, they celebrate with their team, they celebrate in victory circle, and you wonder, like, okay, they wanted to win the 500, but was it more they just kind of wanted that, as a one of the notches on their career, or do they really like get it? Do they get how much the 500 means to this community, to these fans? And you wonder how genuine, when they talk about how much they love Indy, how genuine that really is. With drivers like Elio and TK and now Newgarden, I mean, you see the emotion and how much more it means to them, because they really feel the connection with race day and with the fans. And so it was really cool to see him, go right through the gate, run up into the stands. I did enjoy a tweet I saw that was like, hey, at least, this is some positive, this is some positives from somebody, at an Indiana sporting event going into the stands.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah, I know.
Still too soon, Craig.
Soon.
Still too soon.
So, but yeah, no, that was just one of the coolest things I've seen. I've watched the last lap a few times now just to rewatch it, but I always continue watching the highlights until we get to that part where he jumps in the stands, because that's just so cool. So the Man of the People Award goes to Josef Newgarden after finally winning the greatest spectacle in racing.
I kind of have one quick award I want to give out. I'm going to call it the Tire Catcher Award, and that goes out, shout out to the lady that was working in the suites in turn 2, her car, that caught Kyle Kirkwood's tire as it flew over the fence. Such a miracle nobody got hurt by that. But in all seriousness, I am giving out the Revitalization Award, and that goes to Santino Ferrucci for revitalizing AJ Foyt Racing. We always talk about AJ Foyt at IMS because he's a 4-time winner. He's a legend there. But we never really talk about AJ Foyt Racing because they're never usually up in the conversation. Santino Ferrucci not only brought them back into the conversation, but also helped them bring home a purse that could really benefit this team. They're part of the purse, finishing finishing third. It's significant, especially for a team, a lower budget team like that. That kind of money can be transformational for the future, not just the rest of the season, but for the future in general. So that's why I got to say, Ferrucci wins the Revitalization Award, helping AJ Foyt Racing be revitalized, or Rejuvenation Award too. Either one.
Also, shout out Benjamin Peterson, Rookie of the Year. So I mean,
yes, big time. Also, I should actually, you know what? I should have given the Tire Catcher Award to AJ Foyt.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you see on the broadcast? They actually caught him leaning over the wall, grabbing tires. He was actually on the pit crew. I mean,
well, and
it is 80s and still rocking it.
One of the reasons why Ferrucci was able to finish third was because one of their drivers or one of their pit crew members saved a tire from going off into pit road too. So Tire Catcher Award, goes to
AJ Foyt Racing. But the quote of the day came from it was on TV. Somebody was talking about they had a conversation with AJ Foyt, who he recently had a new pacemaker put in, and his doctor told him he had to stop drinking beer. And he said, "If we win the race this year, I'm going to enjoy a beer. I don't care what the doctor says." So, quote of the race goes to AJ Foyt on that one.
Yeah, and so another incredible Indianapolis 500 now in the books, and so it's time to now kind of look at the post-Indy outlook. Because like I said before, it's kind of wild. We're only actually a third of the way through the season, but the 500
is so much more.
There's so much more racing, and it always feels like this is kind of a lot of sports. Their second half is like much shorter than the first half, and IndyCar the second half feels like much longer.
Hey, it kicks off in great fashion with this coming weekend up at Detroit. Not at Belle Isle, but through the streets of the city of Detroit. Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool.
And the point standings going into that race, Alex Palou is your points leader still. Marcus Ericsson is 20 points back in second. Pato O'Ward is third, 34 points behind. Fourth is Josef Newgarden, 34 points back. And then Scott Dixon is 57 points back behind his teammate Palou. 50 in fifth is where he sits. And so first, we're going to give a hot or cold question where we're going to say if this take is a hot take or a cold take. And that is, hot or cold, Josef Newgarden is the championship favorite after winning the 107th Indy 500. And I say that is a hot take. With Palou's success, the rise of Arrow McLaren, Marcus Ericsson's success, Power's title last year, Newgarden's kind of got lost in the shuffle at times. I know I'm reluctant to pick him because, for one, I feel like in the early days of the podcast, that was just kind of a go-to. Okay, who do we want to pick for the championship, or who do we want to pick to win this given race? I just picked Josef Newgarden. He's really good. And so, but even then, like even here recently, I feel like I've been reluctant to pick him because, he's just not super consistent all the time. One of the reasons why Will Power won, or the reason why Will Power won last year was because of how consistent he is. Josef Newgarden is kind of, like another Penske driver that used to be with the team, Ryan Newman, where he'd win a lot of races, but there'd be also some races where he would kind of negate those wins with like a 20th and stuff like that. And so, it just kind of makes you reluctant to pick him. But remember, he did win the whole darn thing just 4 years ago in 2019. He does have 2 IndyCar titles, as you mentioned earlier. In 2019, he left IMS and entered June, second in the points. He went on to win the title. He left second in the points, finished second in 2020. He left sixth in points in 2021. He ended up finishing second again. Last year, he left fifth in the points. He came in second at the end of the year. And so, in other words, he's finished second in points the last 3 years, and he came from fifth or further behind to finish second in the points the last couple of years. So, this year he's fourth, and not only that, he's got all the momentum from winning the 500. Pelot's going to be tough to beat. Award and Ericsson are strong, but when it comes to the 500 champion, we always think of them as a title contender. And I think that, I think winning the 500 vaults Newgarden to the top of that list when it comes to a favorite to win.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it is. It's a hot take. It for now. I need to see more consistency though out of Josef Newgarden this year. It's been so up and down, but we are getting into some tracks coming up that he is pretty successful at. We're gonna have the doubleheader at Iowa, and he runs really well there.
Would have won both races last year if he didn't crash in the second one.
Right. But yeah, I think it's a hot take just because he hasn't had this kind of momentum coming out of the month of May before, and we've seen how he's finished the years here recently. So I think based off of history, and then now the momentum that he has with winning the 500, I gotta say yes, it is a hot take.
Now, looking at storylines leaving Indianapolis, I think a big one is how does McLaren respond post Indy after an anticlimactic end to what was all told a bounce back month for them. We came into May thinking McLaren needed to have a good month at Indy to get back on track. Their season to that point, outside of Award, had been largely a disappointment. Award was second in the points, but Rosenqvist and Rossi had both had their struggles. But overall, I think you would consider the month successful for the Arrow McLaren team. They made up 2/3 of the podium at the GMR Grand Prix. All four cars were in the top 12, fast 12 in qualifying. Felix Rosenqvist starts on the front row. You could make an argument for any of those four cars bringing home the win on 500 Sunday, but two of the four crash out. Rossi finishes 5th, and Kanan comes home 16th. Not a huge thud, but a thud nonetheless. It wasn't exactly the end of the month they were envisioning. Award is still third in the points, looking for his first win of the season. Rossi is now 7th. So I think the big question going into the rest of the season is, can the Arrow McLaren team finish with two cars in the top 5 in points? Can Award contend for the title? And so let's see if they can keep that momentum up. Let's see how long it takes Award to get his first win of the year. McLaren had a little bit of a bounce back month, but it'll be interesting to see if they can carry that momentum through the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't call this month, the way this month ended, a dud or anticlimactic for them. Because look, the mistakes that were made by Rosenqvist and Award were them racing hard. They knew it wasn't like it was an equipment failure, or
True.
they just weren't running well. Like the cars just weren't not there. They were there. It was driver error or driver pushing it too hard. And Pato Award said it. He's like, yeah, I got a little too impatient. I should have been a little bit more patient and allowed things to play out. But I think they carry I think they have momentum as well. I think they carry that momentum. Now they've gotten through May, so they can just focus on the rest of the season. They know their cars are there. They have the stuff to compete with everybody. So I think we're going to see a page turn. We're going to see them carry the momentum that they have from this month, and it could excel them for the rest of the year. I think you're going to see a resurgence of Alexander Rossi the rest of the way. I think he got some monkeys off of his back. Yeah, there wasn't any wins for him, but a podium finish at the GMR Grand Prix, finishing 4th in the Indy 500, had good equipment, was up there in contention all day. I think that is as good as, he's now in the top 10 in points. Look out for Alexander Rossi to have a heck of a back end of the season.
Yeah, we wondered if he could get back in the top 10. He could, he was like 13th, 14th, and we're like, okay, it's not a double points race.
He's had a big jump,
right? What you got? Any other storylines for me, B. Scott? You got any other things you'd look for the rest of the year?
I'm looking at kind of, can Scott Dixon? I don't know. He just kind of seems off this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had that. I don't know. It's just it hasn't been a normal Dixie year, and
Last couple years,
That,
really.
yeah, last couple of years. So you almost have to wonder what's going on there. Um, I think that's something to keep an eye on. Can Team Penske can build on this momentum from Josef Newgarden and get right up there in the points chase? Because right now, I mean, you look at the standings, it's about a 4-horse race, and beyond that, guys are pretty far out. So, can any of those guys that are right now out of the picture make their way in, like an Alexander Rossi, like a Scott McLaughlin, anybody along those lines? So, there's a lot of there's not a whole lot of standout storylines to look at the rest of the way that are not out of the normal. There's just a lot of tiny little things
Mm-hmm.
to watch for that many people aren't talking about, like the Scott Dixon thing. But I'm really going to watch the second half of the season. I mean, obviously Josef Newgarden you want to watch just because how can he carry that momentum? But Pato O'Ward, how does he bounce back after wrecking his car at the 500 and having probably one of his better shots outside of last year of winning it? How does Pato O'Ward bounce back and keep himself in contention or go out there and win himself an IndyCar championship?
Now, as far as a driver to watch, I'm gonna highlight Alex Palou. He used a dominating win at the GMR Grand Prix to launch himself to first in the standings. He started P1 for the Indy 500 after the fastest pole run of all time, and he was on pace. We talked about it last week. If he wins, does he have the greatest month of all time? And he was on his way to doing that before his collision on pit road with Rinus VeeKay. They're on the streets of Detroit this year, not Belle Isle, so the first time these drivers are going to see that course. Next is Road America, where Palou finished 27th a year ago. So the next couple of races will be key in solidifying Palou as a favorite to bring home his second title in 3 years, because if he has a couple of bad runs, then we could see a little bit of shuffling atop the point standings.
Yeah, like I said, I'm keeping my eye on Pato O'Ward. Like I said, I'm interested in see how he can bounce back. Um, but I'm also watching Alexander Rossi as well. There seems to be a little bit of swagger back there for him again. And if that's the case, that's not good for the rest of the field. We could be potentially looking at Alexander Rossi finding his way back up front consistently. And I think that'd be a really good thing for IndyCar as well.
So before we get out of here, let's go ahead and give our predictions for this Chevy Detroit Grand Prix. We're gonna give a dark horse, and then
This one's hard.
it is hard
This is
because it's
hard. There's
literally fresh
no,
track. Yeah, no, yeah,
yeah,
not a whole lot of things to go on here. We'll give our dark horse and a winner. For me, my dark horse, I went against the grain when I picked Christian Lundgaard. And so I'm gonna do one that's not as against the grain, but it's still kind of just kind of a new name we haven't talked a whole lot about this year, and that is Colton Herta. He's my dark horse. In 6 races on the 2023 campaign, Herta has 4 top 10 finishes, 2 9th-place finishes this May at Indy. So, I mean, not fantastic. I mean, not world-beating by any stretch, but, I mean, he's been good. He's been up there. Andretti has been strong this season. Kirkwood had got his first win. Grosjean had a ton of momentum with how he was running pre-Indy. And I really also liked how Herta rallied from the pit road incident with Grosjean to still have a solid run at the 500. So Herta, he can put himself into contention to win. He's good on the street. He's better on the street circuits, I think, than he is on the ovals. And I think he's gonna have a good run this weekend at Detroit.
yeah. My dark horse. I'm gonna go with Marcus Ericsson. I know it's not much of a dark horse. He's up there second in the points, but look, he does really well on street courses. Winning in Nashville when it was a fresher course. Um, I think that's the Formula One background in him. So, I mean, Roman Grosjean would be another good pick here as a dark horse as well, just because of the Formula One background as there as well. But yeah, I'm going to say Marcus Ericsson's my dark horse.
And I like where your head's at because that's my pick to win. I think Marcus Ericsson does win this race. Not a ton of thought behind this one, but the last time, like you said, IndyCar was at a new street circuit, Nashville, Ericsson came home the winner. So by that logic, could be a strong contender again. And, I did say he had the most momentum coming into May. He had a solid month all told, and he has all the drive and determination after being so close to an Indy 500 crown. I'm pretty sure I picked Pato O'Ward at Detroit last year for the same reason. Like, oh, he's fired up, so he's going to take that into Detroit. But I think that is something to keep an eye on. And, we discussed earlier in the month that, while even though, Ericsson was the points leader going into the month, we still, for whatever reason, just don't really consider him as a contender. We think like, oh, it's going to be Palou or Dixon or Newgarden or McLaughlin maybe or Palou. We talk about all these other drivers. We don't really talk Award. We talk about these other drivers. We don't really talk a whole lot about Ericsson. But here's his chance after a second in Indy, after a win already this season, up there in the point standings. This is his time to be like, okay, I missed out on the 500, but I can get the post-Indy run off to a good start with a win at Detroit. So I've got Marcus Ericsson winning on the streets of Detroit this weekend.
Yeah, it's a good pick. I guess the guy all right, so I think it's going to be a Chevy that wins this weekend.
There you go. That would make sense. That would be a Honda winning would just kind of put a damper on the whole weekend.
I know, because the GM headquarters are right there in Detroit. I mean, it always has meant more for Chevy at Belle Isle, but now that it's actually in the streets of Detroit, a little bit more. So I'm actually gonna say my winner's gonna be Will Power.
Won last year at Belle Isle.
Yeah, and it's just there's just something he's due. He's due, and there's just going to be a ton of eyes on Chevy. So I just feel like Chevy's going to win. If there's a driver that can really do it, I'm going with Will Power.
Hey, that's always a great pick. Will Power is always a strong pick to win the race. And that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for watching and listening. Remember, you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. You can go follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. If you're on the audio side of things, go over to the YouTube channel. Check us out there. Subscribe, ring the bell. You guys killed it. You guys showed a lot of love on all the IndyCar.
You can see our built for radio faces.
Exactly. You guys showed out and showed all the love during the month of May with commenting, leaving likes, posting, that kind of thing. We always enjoyed that. Go over to the TikTok channel, 2.5K over there. We'd love to hit 3K here soon. So go share the love there. And remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
So, as you guys know, this is the last podcast we're going to have until July. B. Scott's going to go kill it during the College World Series. He's going to be, covering that, doing a ton of stuff for baseball. NCAA
so I guess if you want to find me on Twitter for the rest of this month, go to @NCAA Baseball.
Exactly. Go over there. Show B. Scott some love as he covers the College World Series, the NCAA tournament, all that fun stuff. So we will be back in July. There is going to be a little bit of content coming out in that time. So make sure you're locked in. But until July, have a good summer, everybody.